Ladies and gentlemen, the queen of Sin City, Miss Deborah Vance, y'all. You guys are gonna have a fabulous time. Ow!
2,500 shows. What do you have to say?
Well, I'll tell you what I have to say.
Eat your heart out, Celine.
Touch is all it takes, baby, to start defying me.
Pentatonics? Did you know about this?
Marty wants to cut my dates. He said he needs to appeal to a younger crowd.
You need to do something about this, Jimmy. Damien, need you to go to the computer store.
When you talk that sweet talk, I'm more like we're on fire.
You can't get me a meeting to write on anything.
Deborah Vance is intrigued by the idea of you writing jokes for her.
The QVC moo-moo lady.
They're caftans.
You told me to, interrupt you when more important clients call.
I'm on fire.
I'm sending you to Las Vegas.
Why are you here?
I got a call this morning saying that you wanted to meet.
Well, Jimmy sent you against my wishes. Good luck with your career, honey.
Fucking bitch.
Excuse me, did you have something else to say?
Yeah. So cool they let you move into a cheesecake factory.
Is that where you wait tables? That seems like a better fit.
I'd rather sling bang bang chicken and shrimp all day than work here, you classist monster.
We can start early tomorrow.
How's it going in Vegas? You and Deborah Vance, Thelma and Louise yet or what?
No, but I do want to drive off a cliff.
Okay, you ready to do some work?
Let's see. Feet, toes, pedicure.
Wow. It's like watching Picasso sing.
You mean paint?
No.
You said you love me, but you
Make some noise for the OG female comedian, Deborah Vance.
said I was the
I can't believe this is what she's doing today. Is it seriously worth it?
Worth about $100 grand and some stock.
100 grand?
And some stock.
It's gonna be hard to work together if we can't communicate.
We don't work together. You work for me.
You're making it really hard.
You don't know what hard is. You got plucked off the internet at what, 20? You just got lucky.
I'm also good.
Good is the minimum. It's the baseline. And even if you're great, you still have to work really fucking hard. You have to scratch and claw and it never fucking ends. And it doesn't get better. It just gets harder.
Can you feel it?
Oh good, my ride's here.
Wait, you're leaving me here?
Yep. This is late night, and yes, I am a woman. I know it's very confusing. My accountant didn't even know what to put on my tax return, so he just wrote mouthy broad. When you share a sense of humor with someone, you make each other better. When you get big, there's no sense of excitement, no risk that people are gonna hate you.
Oh, come on. Plenty of people can still hate you.
That was good.
Hey everybody, welcome to all of you watching us here in Zoom, those of you who are going to be watching us on YouTube Live, on Facebook Live, basically wherever you're watching us, thank you for being here. We are delighted to have you for another amazing edition of Women in Film's Laptop Cinema Club, the series where we bring you compelling conversations and fascinating stories from the people creating the media you love. I'm Ebony Adams, Manager of Public Programs for Women in Film, and no lie, I've been looking forward to this Q&A since I think episode 3, when Ava fell out of her chair, got busted, sending a new photo to her ex, and I was like, Lord Jesus, I got a lot to talk to people about. So join me in welcoming co-creators and executive producers, showrunners Lucia Agnello, Paul Downs, and Jen Statsky to the Zoom Lounge. Hey.
Hi.
I'm gonna try and keep it professional and not just laugh my way through this, because I know y'all have been doing tons of press for the show. You're probably, I was just talking to Lucia, getting asked the same questions over and over again. So hopefully I won't burden you with that kind of stuff. But if you want to take the conversation in a different way, just go ahead and take the reins. It's all good.
Everything to talk about. It's all good. We'll talk about anything.
Okay, good. The thing I want to talk about first is, can you talk about how much of the show was sort of together before pandemic kind of stopped business as usual? Were y'all writing in lockdown? Did you have writer's room over Zoom?
Yeah. We were casting the pilot when lockdown happened.
Wow.
So then, our entire writer's room was all over Zoom during the pandemic, and shooting was during it as well. Yeah.
And the post process. And actually, because the pandemic happened while we were supposed to be shooting the pilot, HBO MAX because we had Gene Smart attached and because we were there was some momentum, they were like, obviously we're not shooting this pilot anytime soon because of the pandemic. So then actually they gave us the series order because they knew we kind of were going to be in a holding position indefinitely. So we actually were able to then go ahead, like Jen said, and write the whole thing over Zoom, which it was a unique, interesting experience. Like, I think we can't quite know how it changed the show in some ways, but here we are.
So I think, like, for people who aren't in the industry, to have heard that, like, oh, production has shut down, or people are writing, over Zoom or Skype as opposed to being all in a room with each other, it doesn't necessarily penetrate because they don't know exactly what that means. Y'all have all been in writers' rooms before. So you note the difference, but I'm wondering, like, do you notice a difference trying to write over Zoom when you're doing a comedy and doing that kind of back and forth, over a screen? Like, did you notice, like, what, I think we could have tightened something up, if I was able to bounce it off, someone in the room? Or did you find that, like, no, we developed a rhythm pretty quickly once we got started?
We were pretty lucky in that it was really efficient. There was no commute, so that was huge. There was no traffic to deal with. And once you were off, you were off. But, staring at a screen is certainly draining in certain ways. And also, I think, especially with Zoom and just doing something virtually, the kind of natural, oh yeah, and what about this? Or just the way that you joke with each other was a little bit more difficult because, when two people are speaking, you can only hear one. So you can't be like, oh, and it's harder to sort of yes and in that way. But we luckily developed a pretty comfortable shorthand. And I think people, because we were in the very beginning of pandemic, I think it was kind of nice that people got to sign on and be together and do that work together. So in that way, it was also weirdly comforting. I'm sure you experienced this in the beginning. You're like, zooming with friends. And then eventually you're like, okay, I've looked at a screen for a long time. So maybe we'll just wait till we get vaxxed. But yeah, I think the biggest challenge was doing production because, obviously safety was at the forefront of everything we did. And so we had to wear 2 masks and a shield. Plus, we're wearing headphones to hear the mics. And we were also wearing a wearable tracking device to let you know if you were within 6 feet of people. So we were like covered in gear, which is a little bit hard when you're going up to an actor and saying, hey, could you, it's a really intense thing. But everybody, our crew and our cast and everybody involved was so incredible and really so agile and so honestly passionate about the work that we got through it.
You mentioned, like actually being on set, the actual production of the show. And I want to ask about, the conversations that you had with the other members of the creative team. So just starting right from episode 1, I was struck by how beautiful the show is. It's so gorgeously shot and the interiors are so beautiful, right? So like,
I'm pointing, she can't totally see it.
So, and one of the things that I loved the most is how, again, episode 1, Deborah goes from this very sort of like warm environment that's loud, in the theater, and then she slowly makes her way home, and she's in this cavernous space. And you go from, a place in which she sort of owns the room, and she owns any space that she enters, to a space in which she's almost swallowed, So I would love to hear, like, what sort of creative directives were you giving, to like your DP, the production designers, to say like, okay, here's what we're trying to emphasize about this character and where she is.
Yeah, especially that opening sequence, we really wanted it to feel like when she's working, so when she's on stage and she's getting on the plane and she's going to QVC and she's coming back, like all that stuff is fun and the camera's moving and it's exciting and it's like the fun flashiness of the world of Deborah Vance. But like you're saying, once she gets home, the camera is now more still, it's moving slowly, and it is photographing spaces where she's very small in the frame. So whether it's her in her kitchen eating, or whether it's her in her bedroom, a tiny, and that was actually written in the script, a very tiny shot of a tiny woman in a large room. Like we really wanted the shots to feel like we were saying, hey, she is really isolated when she's not in her work world. And similarly with Ava, we also wanted her, like the first shot you see of her is her, profile set against the expanse of Los Angeles. She's also by herself in her own way. And really, I tried to make sure that the camera was kind of emphasizing that these two women out in their own world are very alone. But then once they actually sit down with each other, I wanted the shots to be very dirty, which, means like the back of and head of somebody's shoulders and the other person's is in the foreground of the other person's shot. So to emphasize the fact that only once they're in each other's lives do they finally have a worthy adversary, somebody that they can actually be on the same page with. And that is supposed to visually sell, like this is two people who are finally finding a worthy partner, and there's chemistry there, even though they're, arguing and bitch slapping each other or whatever, and so it was a choice to make sure that the camera emphasized where I wanted the characters to feel emotionally.
The show does such a great job, like threading an emotional needle when, you feel like some deep human emotion for people, and then something completely ludicrous, will happen. I would love to hear you talk about, like, as you look back over season 1, are there episodes or scenes where you think, like, this is it? This is the heart of what we were trying to get at. Like, if someone hasn't watched it, but they watched this right here, this is what we were trying to do, and we executed it.
Well, I think for me, one of the things that really speaks to the essence of what we were trying to say with the show happens in the very first episode in the pilot, There Is No Line. She's at lunch. Deborah Vance is at lunch with the owner of her casino, who's saying to her, I'm going to start cutting your dates. I'm pushing you aside. And he says, it doesn't even look like you're having fun. You're on cruise control up there. And Deborah says, I wish I were on cruise control, but I'm always playing defense because of assholes like you. And the idea that she's been knocked down a million times and pushed to the side and cast out to the desert, and now again is having to do this in this act of her career, for us was really central to the DNA of the show. And also that scene in his palace and his casino, I really think does speak to, the way in which women can be so easily cast aside when mediocre white men really get acclaim and attention. But that for me is one.
Yeah, I think that's
certainly.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, Jen, what about you?
I think you said kind of the tonal, there's deep emotion and then something absurd and funny. And I think also in episode 2, Deborah's, monologue about work and hard work, and that is so emotional and so real and so grounded. And then it is the coda at the end is, oh good, my bride's here, and the helicopter, there's a helicopter picking her up in the middle of the desert. And so that is like kind of, I think, hopefully tonally, like when people watch episode 1 and 2, they're like, oh, I get what this show is going to be. It's going to be like life. Hopefully there's real emotion and heartbreak and pain and suffering and all that. But like, also, yes, this woman can call the local news and have a helicopter pick her up in the middle of the desert because it's funny and big, and she's a larger than life character that also exists in real life, So that's one scene to me that sticks out of my mind for sure.
I wouldn't necessarily say that this tonally is what I think the show is, but I do think that one relationship that I find very interesting is the Deborah DJ relationship. Deborah and her daughter, played by Caitlin Olsen. And in the 7th episode at DJ's dinner party, there's a toast scene that Deborah, DJ asks everybody to toast her for her birthday because she knows how to have a good time. And so, when she asks Deborah to toast her, what I like about that scene is that Deborah, it shows us, like, I think how we're trying to like show little cracks in somebody and how somebody can become a little bit more emotional. And I think that's a nice moment of character evolution for us, in that idea that like Deborah, who's this hardened woman who's had trauma in her past, and as a result is the way she is like starting to let people in a little bit. And so she gives this really like sweet, lovely monologue that I just love because I love Jean's performance in so much of this show. But then how that toast evolves into this argument which is really painful for both of them, but it also has some really big jokes. Like there's one moment where DJ says, my therapist, Lori, and Deborah says, you're Lori, if she can't figure out her adult acne, she can't figure out your life. And DJ screams, I told you not to Google her. I said, don't Google her. I said, don't. And I just think that there's that scene does so many things at once. It's like emotional, and then they're really kind of mean to each other, but also there's big, to me, really funny moments in it. I look at a scene like that and I'm kind of like, this shouldn't work, but I feel like it does. And so that's one scene that comes to mind.
And it's a testament, I think, to both Jean Smart and also Caitlin Olsen, who is so funny, but also so good. What an amazing actor. I mean, her eyes are welling up with tears. The both of them are so good at playing the truth of life, which is it can be in one moment emotional, and then in the next there's a joke. Someone makes a joke or says something cutting, and they're just both so good together. We love watching them work.
We lucked out.
Everyone is justifiably recognizing that it's Jean Smart's world and we're all just living in it. You only focus on Jean Smart, you're gonna miss some of the genius that happens outside of those scenes, right? Like Kayla alone had me just taking laps around my couch. Anyone, obviously you cast the show, so you knew how good these people were. That's why you selected them. But was there anyone who kind of like surprised you with the way they brought it, on set? Like once they were actually in the mix and you were like, oh, okay, there's some magic happening here.
I didn't think Paul had it in him. and he really brought it.
You know what? I wanted to prove it to these women that I deserve to be there. So I tried.
I mean, I think, like you said, we know all these. I mean, we either auditioned them or already knew of them. And so we believed them to some extent. But I think that there were some, kind of little moments where some people would surprise us. I think Lauren Weedman, who plays Mayor Joe Pezzamenti, she comes in episode 7 and then she returns in episode 10. Like, it was really hard in the edit for us to decide what incredible jokes to use of that. That woman just like comes in and like stretches out the little moments she has into like a whole world. And she really is so funny.
And who I was really impressed by? Of course, we all were fans of his and we're really happy that he wanted to do the show, but Chris McDonald is such a good actor. Yeah. And so, a lot of people know him from, he's Shooter McGavin. We've seen him in comedy, but he's also in Requiem for a Dream and Thelma and Louise. And like, he's a real actor. And so watching him, I was very impressed because he's such a pro. He was somebody that, again, just was better than you could have imagined.
It's a hard part, because he's supposed to be a little bit sleazy, but also charming, but also he loves Deborah, but also he's not with Deborah. And so it's very complicated, and he really towed that line beautifully.
Also, we can't not mention the fact that Hannah Einbinder, who plays Ava, is someone who had never acted a day before in her life and is such a natural. I mean, we saw her several times and she chemistry read with Jean. We saw a lot of fantastic actresses for that role, but she had a different cadence and a different thing. And she was, in a way, the part. She's a stand-up, she's a comedian, she's believably a writer, she's 25. There's so many things. And then when she got together with Jean, there was a moment, and our casting director, Gina McCarthy, said to us, "Did you see Hannah blush?" She blushed at something when Jean says, "Oh, you're a fan of mine? What's your favorite joke?" And like puts her on the spot. She blushes, which is like a physiological thing. So she just got a gift, and it was really, really impressive to watch her continue to deliver on that.
She is amazing to watch. The way she moves her body, in sometimes very subtle ways, and sometimes these very like large, sort of like gawky ways.
Yes.
And just so fantastic. I mean, this is such a small moment, but even when she's having she's in the middle of this breakdown, and then she goes to collect her Postmates, and it's just that giant cup from Jack in the Box, the look on her face, just this moment of realization. So perfect. So, okay, y'all created the show together. Y'all showrun it, executive produce it together. Not to cause trouble in the family, but do you feel like, you each have particular strengths, in certain areas that you brought to this particular project, and you're like, and it doesn't even need to be you. You can be like, yeah, I think Paul just really, there's something about this that he always does well, and that's what, he brings to the project, or Lucia does, How does that work in your working relationship and your collaboration?
I'm being honest, and I'm never honest.
He's been lying the whole time, guys.
Pinocchio style. But I honestly believe that it changes. It really does fluctuate. And I think, you know, you could say, oh, well, Lucia directed the pilot or a bunch of the episodes. She must be the visual person. And like sometimes, but sometimes not at all. And sometimes I'm more thinking about story. Jen will be like, oh, well, what about, you know, we should make sure to clock this person's reaction. I'm like, oh yeah, that's a great idea. Like, you know, like, I think we all try to be thinking when we're in the room, like really be concentrating on story. And then when we're on set, we're really trying to make sure like this stuff makes sense and like everything is working. And are there extra jokes? Should we cut this line? Like, I think we're all, and I could be wrong, we're all kind of like doing Tetris constantly to try to be like, is this right? Is this right? Is this right? And so it's like, we're all kind of throwing everything we can into it at every moment. It could be any number of things. I guess I'm saying none of us are that good at anything. No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding.
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, it sounds like a cop out, and like I could wax poetic about how wonderful and talented Paul and Lucia are and all their specific skills, and I'll do that. I'll do that in a separate panel. Honestly, I'm gonna need more time for it, but I think as relevant to the show, like, you know, Pam Brady, who's a wonderful writer and showrunner and creator, once said to me, like, I think of TV writer, maybe someone told making TV, like there's a body on the table and it's dying and everyone just needs to pitch in to be helping save the body. And like, that's a very grim way to think of it, but it's like kind of true. Like it's very much so all hands on deck for all three of us. And I do think we're trying to think about it in a very holistic way, all three of us. I don't know, is this a cop-out answer?
I don't know, it's just
I can get specifics if you want specific. I'll do a different thing because I do think you're right. I think we all like share a lot of hats and pass a lot of things around. And also the show's about a creative collaboration and a marriage of people who see each other and value each other for their sense of humor. And that's very personal to us because we love each other and have worked together so much. But I will say we have stolen Jen to be on set with us for our movie Rough Night or for my character special for Netflix because she is such a funny writer, such a funny joke writer that we're always like, well, she's the funniest person around. She's got to come and help us. And then I'll say for Lucia, you know, being an actor and someone who's worked with other directors, Lucia has a real gift, especially in comedy, to be like, this can be funnier in this way. You know, it's like she's writing and directing, so she can be on set and be like, this is how we can make this funny if it's not working, or this is how this can be even funnier. And so those are unique skills, I think, to both of them. And I think the show, what I bring to the show is it's feminine energy.
I was waiting for you to say it. Absolutely. For the sake of women in film audiences who may not have heard this, your responses to this yet. You know, my expectation, if you hear just the log line for the show, or just like a vague sketch of it, is that, okay, so you got this, you know, legendary Vegas comedian who's kind of past it, you know, not really in tune with what's, you know, like the current zeitgeist. My expectation is it's going to be some washed up dude. It's going to be some character actor that I've got a fondness for, but it's a dude, right? I don't want to say that it's a radical choice to have created this show around there, but it is radical. The fact that you have this older woman being just evisceratingly funny, right? And being messy, but also full of heart, you know, this is not something we often get to see. Like, was this always from the beginning, you know, going to be a show about a female comedian, an older female comedian? And at what point do you identify, you know, Jean Smart and you're like, that's our Deborah?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, the origin for us was actually talking about female comedians who, for one reason or another, never really, especially as they got older, never really had the same acclaim or opportunities as their male counterparts. You know, like obviously very few late night hosts that are female. I think Sam B is, I don't know, Lily Singh, but like even beyond that, whether it's like Lifetime Achievement Awards or specials or shows where they get to analyze their lives, like it doesn't happen for so many of these women who are hustlers and have been working so hard and so funny. Just for some reason, I mean, we know the reason, it's misogyny, but the whole reason we started thinking of the show is like, well, what about these women? How can we tell the story of what they've had to endure and kind of through the eyes of a younger woman, learn to respect and learn to appreciate what this woman went through. And so for us, the origin was always, why aren't there more successful female comedians of a certain age? And if you start with that way, I mean, it was never even a consideration that it would be be a guy, because that seems just a little less interesting, I guess.
Did you get any pushback, as you were going out trying to sell the show?
No.
We were really lucky in that when we pitched the show, people really kind of got this woman, because she is an amalgamation of people like Elaine May and Debbie Reynolds and Lucille Ball and Joan Rivers and Phyllis Diller, all of these like showbiz veterans who have a similar story. A lot of them, their managers robbed them or their husbands, whatever. Like, I think a lot of that. So in that way, it was kind of a recognizable character. But when we pitched it to HBO Max, we actually didn't even really finish the pitch because Susanna Makos at HBO Max, who's our executive there, said, "Oh, have you read Lauren Bacall's autobiography? You got to read Debbie Reynolds." Like, she really understood the kind of story. And so in that way, there wasn't pushback. But I won't lie, we always were like, are we going to be able to sell a show about a woman who's in her like late 60s?
Yeah.
Like, can we do that? Will people want to do it? We're so glad that the answer was yes, because we always wanted to watch it. That was our guiding principle. We were like, because we came up with the idea almost 6 years ago. We were all working on different things, Broad City or The Good Place or what have you, and we just kept coming back to it. And I think it was really because we were like, not only do we want to tell it, but I want to watch it. I really want to see it.
One of the things that I was struck by was the way Deborah shows the grind and how much work she's been doing nonstop. So you get, shots of like, her from the past and various decades, and she's just been working for so long. And of course, there's that great, monologue that you referenced, and I think where, she says like, it never fucking ends and it just gets harder, and you got to ask yourself, like, do you have what it takes? If you want to be at this level, I know I have what it takes. And ultimately, anything stopping me from being just a footnote is me, because this dude over here is trying to, cut me back. So yeah, it was just, you do think how many people have been kind of relegated to a photo album,
Yeah.
Yeah.
a retrospective, who should still be working.
Yeah,
right, exactly right.
Or even like, with what happened to Deborah with her story, like someone who was like maligned in the press and had to just lean into being a joke. How many women's story, not even a footnote, they stopped doing it. They stopped performing. They stopped doing comedy. They stopped being in the arts. Like, that is also something that we talked a lot about that's in the DNA of this show. Like, it's a love letter to these women working so hard. And it's also a love letter to women who maybe stopped because it wasn't a kind environment for them. And that's such a tragic thing. And, it gets talked about in episode 8, 1.69 million and stuff like that. That's a really, really tragic thing that so many women's stories like didn't get to be heard because it just wasn't a welcoming place for them to be.
And hopefully people who are on the fringes feel seen by this, because I think it's not just a women's story. It's also queer performers or BIPOC performers or anybody who's alt, anybody who's not honestly born white male and preferably middle class. It's just different. It's just harder. And I know I say that as a white male, but I do think it's, it's hopefully a story that can be related to beyond just women.
Oh yeah, I mean,
beyond comedy, just anybody,
of course,
in any industry.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like, it's, as I was saying, like, I wasn't prepared for how much I was going to feel, for Deborah, and Ava too. I think, it's tempting to kind of dismiss her as just, absurd and ludicrous. And of course, Hannah Einbinder is so great at playing those scenes. It's easy to leave, your perception there, but there's something so much deeper to it. So, Lucia, one of the things you mentioned before we got started was that y'all love to talk about kind of like the granular parts of creating a show. And so I would love to open it up to, things that maybe you haven't gotten a chance to talk about, but that you're particularly proud of, creative decisions that you made on the show, the sort of processes, that you instituted, just the kind of really the creative decisions, that ultimately, brought the show together that perhaps people don't think about or they don't even know go into making a show.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, it's interesting. Well, for one thing, I think the fact that there are 3 of us, 3 showrunners, is actually kind of an unusual thing, but has been, I think, for us really, really satisfying and great. I mean, because for one, if we have a disagreement, that's an odd number. So 2 people think one thing, one person thinks the other, and it's kind of done. And so in that way, It makes decisions easier.
But we always do what the one person thinks. The two people think it is too much.
Yeah. I want to surprise you. So
Yeah.
Least popular opinion.
So that, I mean, that
factions forming, you know, just like, being like, I think Jen's full of shit. I don't care what she
well, honestly, we're very lucky that it's constantly always evolving. Like it's not, it really is. You never know. And that's kind of cool and terrifying that we really are all, I mean, and I think in that way, it's like, because we always do like, think about like, what is the North Star for us? What is the thing that are we all like, what is the vision we're all trying to like, because you have to make, as showrunners, as director, you have to be making a million choices a day. Like you do, whether it's the tiniest choices of like, do you want this deck of cards or this deck of cards? Are the same, but this one's shinier. Or whether it's, do we want this wall to be pink? Or, hey, is it okay that they're wearing outfits that are kind of similar? Should we change her shirt out? Well, it's 20 minutes to base camp and then 20 minutes back. Okay, well, we'll be shooting by then, or we can be holding it up. And like, you know, as a director, one of the most stressful things for me, if I'm just going to be airing out my anxiety, which I'm happy to do, is, you know, you have a certain amount of pages or scenes that you're going to get done in a day. And you might be shooting a scene, you have some amount of coverage. Do you want to change up what the shots are? Do you want to try to get the shots you have, a couple more takes of that? Or are you ready to turn around? Or what from the shot list that you planned and scheduled and thought about endlessly, do you want to keep, and what do you have to lose right now? And deciding whether you're going to move on to the next scene, or you're going to try to get a couple more here. Because of course you always want one or two more shots or takes, but then you have to constantly be looking at what is the rest of the day. And you don't want to get to the end of the day and be like, okay, now I have no time left. I have 2 takes for this scene, or it's 1 shot and I want it to be 2 shots, or whatever that is. And I think that kind of constant calculation is, what like your pragmatic brain has to be working in a crazy way, but it's like you don't really think of that when you're like, I want to tell a story. But like there's so much around being able to like be like, I want to make sure I'm giving myself or us in the edit the most amount of options. It's like that kind of stuff is a really interesting thing that I don't think people think about or talk about a ton, which is essentially, I guess I'm saying, time management. But you know, I think like I used to wait tables for many, many years. And like, I actually think waiting tables is like the best training to be a director or showrunner ever, because for one, every time you go to a table, you have to almost immediately assess, who are these people? What do they need from me? Do they want me to stay away? Do they want me to be talking to them? What kind of personality do they want, or whatever, a million things. And then if you do the front of house and back of house, which might be like your executives, but also your people that you hire for your department heads or whatever. And also being like, there's so much going on right now, and you're like in the weeds, and you're just like, there's so much. And instead of getting overwhelmed, you get used to being like, okay, this next. And you just kind of have to deal with one thing at a time, because you have to get through the day and you can't get stressed out and panic. And so it's it's like, it's not something I think that people like really consider when they say like, oh, this is a job I want to do, which I mean, you should do. Maybe you won't have to deal with all of those anxieties, but I think it is like a really big part of creating a show and working, you know, running a show and directing it. Yeah, I think that's, if you can kind of wrap your mind around that as being just as important as, oh, the like adjustment I'm going to give this actor, which is just as important, but like, that's just as much a part of the job as the creativity of it. That's just something I just went off on.
I love that. And it anticipates one of the questions that we often ask, which is, you know, what are the sort of unexpected skills that you need for this job that, you know, emerging filmmakers don't know? We often, you know, have, you know, like a large segment of the audience for these conversations are people who are just getting started in the industry or sort of, you know, moving into mid-career. But, you know, just the question of, okay, what am I not anticipating? What sorts of things do I need to know and become adept at? So that really perfectly anticipated that question.
It's not exactly something you can train for either. It's like you only know it by doing it, unless you just wait tables, and then actually you totally know what you're doing.
Season 2, can you give us kind of broad strokes, things that you're hoping to do in season 2? And then I'm going to go to audience questions.
Jean Smart will be there.
I appreciate the confirmation, because you never know. You know, I don't want it to be like a Game of Thrones situation. You think someone's
there's no red wedding. Yeah, we're not.
No red wedding. I mean, I mean, I guess no spoilers, right? Because I hope everyone's seen the finale from season 1. I don't know. So I'm just gonna obviously what we set up at the end of the season 1 finale is very much so where we are headed, that Deborah is going to be going back out on the road and trying to figure out this new show, which is a very different thing for her. And they're going to be put in situations that are not what Deborah is maybe used to in her comfort zone, having just been in Vegas for so long now.
If they just end up back in Prem, I'm good.
We all agree. We love Jefferson Mays. So
we absolutely want Jefferson Mays,
back
which is
with
Tim,
Prem.
the antique dealer, back in the season.
That's another excellent actor who came and just nailed it beyond our wildest dreams.
We were so lucky because he's one of the many Tony winners we have on the show, which is just wild.
It is just that the cast is stacked. Everyone brought it.
It's not.
Yeah. The what's coming up in the next season is sort of a boring question, standard question, whatever. Let's move into audience questions, which will probably be better. Okay, so
it's a great question. I would love the audience to answer that question.
Yeah, we love this. Go to the chat. Tell us what you think should happen in season 2. You never know. We might do.
You have to start it with "I released this" and
send a waiver.
I'm not gonna go to court for nobody to say that anything unless there's money behind it. But okay, so Michelle Aldrich says she loves Hacks, so excited. She feels seen. She's a queer Michigander. Did you write the role for Megan Stalter? When you were first writing a pilot, are you envisioning a certain comedian or actor for the role?
So we must admit that yes, we were aware and fans of Megan's, and so we did write with her in mind. Though it was the kind of thing where we were open to, if whoever wins the part. And so we did audition the role. In fact, she auditioned with the honeymoon suite scene from the finale. And there was no choice. She is such a liquid, funny star. She's just so great. While we had her in mind, it was hers to lose. She sealed the deal, I gotta say.
Aaron Zapsik is asking, Paul, can you speak to what it's like to work as both a writer and actor on the show?
Yeah, it's great to write yourself a part because then you don't have to audition, and that's huge. Wearing multiple hats can be difficult, and what I've tried to do, because it's not the first project where I've both acted and then also worked behind the camera, I really try now when I'm acting not to worry about anything else. Really try and let go, because I think the other thing that you must be and often are as a showrunner or director is a bit of a control freak, and so as a producer on something or a writer on something, when I'm also acting, I'm thinking about a lot of different things. And so I've gotten better, I think, at just doing the acting. And when you do that, it's way more fun. But it's also been great because, I've really enjoyed sitting in the at monitor with my cohorts here. And that's also certainly satisfying. It's harder. That part's harder, I will say. But I'm lucky I get to do it all.
And again, if you write the role for yourself, you're the boss. What are they gonna do? Fire you?
You never know.
He also directed 2 of, I think, our favorite episodes, episode 5, Falling, and episode 8, 1.69 million. And so he really did do it all, like very much so. I don't think anybody has as many titles as you do on the show.
No one wears more hats on the show.
Yeah.
Well, that's because I'm a clothes horse,
Are you hoping to direct more in season 2? Are you planning to?
I would like to, yeah. I mean, like I said, it's a much more taxing job. It's much harder. You're doing so much. And when you get to play and perform, not that that's an easy job, because there's certainly all kinds of challenges to that job. But it is also really fulfilling. So I would like to. I just find that, Lucia directed 6, and I do not know how she did 6, because after 2, I was like, so you put so much of yourself into it. And there is so much, as she was saying, court vision and thinking about all the moving pieces and what you're doing the next day, even, that it's really, it can be draining.
Yeah, from an outside view of it, as someone who didn't direct, it really is the, like you're saying, pragmatic part of the brain that has to be scheduling and thinking about all that. That is incredibly taxing. It's really, really difficult. And I had been on set before for many episodes of TV that I'd written and worked with the director that way, but never been on set with a director who is also showrunner, EP, creator. And so it is a testament to Paul and Chia, because it's like, as Lucia was saying, you're keeping so many things in your brain from wearing all those hats, but then you also, just the job of director alone on a day-to-day TV show is very difficult. So it's a tribute to them that they were able to do it.
Yeah.
Thank you. I should also say, I feel so fortunate to do it. And I am so grateful. I don't want it to seem like, oh my God, it's hard. Because it is really hard. It's just to be honest about it. But it's really nice when you get to do that stuff when it's been in your head. You know what I mean? It's just like so great to then, and especially when you get to work with the cast we have and the crew we have, because we were very lucky.
Yeah. And I think, because you do have the relationship to the show, you're not just a, director for hire. That was brought on and sort of, had to immerse yourself in a world very quickly and try and match tone and, get to know people. But absolutely the amount of work sounds phenomenal, just like, and it was phenomenal work. Okay. So an anonymous attendee is asking, I've heard you all joke about Deborah and Ava's relationship being psychosexual, but the audience seems to have picked up on that specifically after episode 7. And I'm wondering if Ava's dream would be further unpacked or discussed later on.
Great question.
It's funny to say picked up on her because it's like, well, they full on kiss.
But they have jumped on it. I feel like some of the audience.
Yeah, we've discussed it.
Yeah, we have. Yeah.
We have discussed it. We've discussed both ways in which it can play out, that things could be just fun things, or
yes,
or deeper things. But
yeah.
But it is a testament to, I think, like Paul said, the show is about a creative collaboration, and I think it's because there's a specific type of creativity when you really vibe with someone. Like it turns you on, for lack of a better term. And that is, I think, also, this is a depiction of that kind of energy, and whether it will manifest in more, keep watching.
We can't deny their chemistry.
No.
Their chemistry.
Well, and ultimately it is a love story. This is a love story. So whether or not they end up physically together, they are certainly on the path to hopefully deepening that love.
They are the two pepper shakers.
That's
are.
right.
There you go.
You have really, I gotta say, Ebony, your questions have been very astute, and I feel very seen by them. I'm not kidding.
Yeah.
Truly, your read of the show was so good.
This show was so good. So good. Like, for real. Going back to the writer's room, Sachi is saying, this might be a stupid question, no stupid questions, but what is the Zoom chat etiquette like in a virtual writer's room?
I think it's very similar to a regular writer's room. I think what's interesting is, in a regular writer's room, something that I think is so important, even though you have a task at hand and you need to stay on focus and get it done, the moments where people are just like sharing stories and joking around and doing bits are so important to the fabric of a writer's room. It makes people feel creatively just much more free. And so when you're on a Zoom, it feels very all business. You're like, well, it's a video conference. I should just be doing the work. And then I slam my laptop down and I'm done. And so it was, I think, something we tried to do and hopefully did an okay job of, is encouraging those moments where people were just telling some random, stupid, funny story, even if it didn't connect to the work, because it actually does connect to the work, because developing a creative bond with people is about sharing your life with each other. And so it's an interesting thing. That's something that happens much more easily in an in-person writer's room. And so that we kind of, I think, try to strike a balance in our Zoom writer's room.
Another anonymous attendee, or perhaps the same one, I don't know. Can you talk a bit about the 1.69 million episode? How she handles that guy felt like something I'd never seen before. You think she's just going to heckle him, but the deal she strikes is almost like a fantasy of what could happen to those guys.
Yeah, we always knew we wanted to do an episode that dealt with the way in which Deborah interpreted assault, and the generational divide between, this isn't okay, and it's like, that's how it was done back then. Everybody got groped or whatever. We wanted to deal with that, and we wanted to put her into an old club. And I think early on in the process of writing that, we knew we were talking about that idea that just by doing the act of performing, Deborah did a lot for other women, which led to that marble staircase monologue in the green room. But the paying him money Jen pitched, and it was a long time to get there. That took a while. That was like the very last thing, because we knew we wanted to take him down. We knew we wanted her to do right by women in current day, and also we knew we wanted to take down the kind of guy who would joke about your breast before he brings you on stage. So we knew we were doing all that. We were just like, how does she really get it? And then, money was one of her, it's her armor. It's the thing that she's used to protect herself. So why not use it to take this guy down? And it was really fun.
Yeah, satisfying.
But you're right, it's a fantasy, right? It's like this form of vigilante justice. Like in the real world, these spaces are still not entirely safe for, again, people who are not born white cis males all the time. And so it's such a satisfying fantasy, I think, but it's also frustrating, I think, that it is a fantasy. We've heard from so many people who watched that episode that were like, I had a really emotional reaction to that, because I've had that guy do that to me, and it fucking sucks, and it still happens. And so it's both wonderful that Deborah does that, but it is a fantasy. Yeah.
What was the process like in deciding like who directs what for the show?
Yeah, Lucia always was going to do the majority of the episodes. We knew that, and we were interested in having more than one. We had one guest director, Desiree Akavan, but we wanted to have more. But with COVID, it was very, very difficult because things moved around so much. And I always knew that I wanted to direct, and we knew that Lucia was always going to do the pilot, was going to set the look and the tone for the show, and I just got to copy that.
And we also block shot. So if this is back to the minutia, sorry, did I interrupt you?
No, go for it.
So basically block shooting, for anybody who doesn't know, is like, instead of just doing one episode at a time, you'll have, let's say 2, 3, sometimes 4, for us it ended up kind of being 10, but whatever, episodes where, like, in these first 3 episodes, anytime we're shooting a kitchen scene, we're going to shoot them all in the same day, because we're already there. The lights are set up, the production design, the props are all set, whatever it is. So that way you shoot all of the scenes from the kitchen and that whatever. But because of COVID and so many things changing around, we ended up having to really mix it up so much. So in any given day, we could be shooting a scene from episode 1 or 4 or 9 and 10, or it would totally got turned around. And so because of that, that's also why it was easier for us to keep a lot of the directing, in-house, between Paul and I doing 8 of them, and then Desiree doing 2, is because, I mean, this is very technical, but if you are holding directors, they can't necessarily just be hanging. I'm directing 1 episode or 2 episodes. I can't be hanging around.
That means they can't work on other things.
4 months while I just direct these 2 episodes. So because of COVID is a big reason why we had the amount of directors be so small. It was really just something for production and technicality and all that. But
although you would have still done the majority.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
It's a challenge. I had come mostly, Paul and Lucia had block shot mostly on Broad City, but I had come from like Good Place and Parks and stuff where we didn't block shoot. And block shooting creatively is very challenging, because it's helpful for your brain to shoot in the order of the story progressing, 1 to 2 to 3. And it's very challenging when you're like, okay, this scene in episode 7, I hope the way it ends up playing out in 3, 4, 5 is still going to work for how we're feeling the character is at emotionally in that moment. So it's helpful production wise to block shoot, but it's also very creatively difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine for performers that would be.
It is.
To navigate and negotiate your performance.
Especially if they have a large arc in the season. So they're really in a different place emotionally in this episode versus that episode. I think Carl Clement Hopkins, who played Marcus, really has quite a pretty intense arc over the season. And he hadn't really, I don't think he's been in things before, but never as like one of the leads and having a big arc. So, and he comes mostly from theater. So I think he was like, oh, this is a very different way to approach it, because he's also like, incredibly talented, trained actor. And so he's very committed to like, what is my character feeling in this moment, And, usually I think he spends time really like getting into the head, but then it's like, great, now get out of that mindset and get into this one, because we're moving in, after lunch.
This scene happened before that one.
Exactly. So it is a big challenge for actors. And I actually wonder for actors who have been acting for a while who are getting, this is happening to more and more if they find it stifling or difficult or in a weird way liberating, because it allows them to just be like doing so much more all the time. I don't know. I mean, it's not ideal, but I think actually in streaming it's happening more and more, I think.
Yeah. That's
if you're a method actor, how you can't.
Yeah, you're always in character, so it's fine.
This is, that's so fascinating. Okay, last question. I'm a Chicago comedy writer and was wondering what advice you would have given your younger self before you got your big break in TV comedy.
My advice would be, I mean, if you are a writer and you want to be writing, you just have to write. I know that's like, but I do think the more you write, the better. I wish in college I had done more writing for myself, whether that was stand-up or, I mean, I was writing sketch in college, but I never wrote a pilot. I didn't ever try to write a feature. I never tried things like that. And I kind of wish that I had. I wish I had just, given it a go. So I think write whatever you can in whatever form you can. Try things, experiment with things. The more you work the muscle, the better it will get.
I'm literally just going to repeat what he said in a different way, but It's exactly the same thing. I'm just ripping him off. But like, I feel like now that I've known many, many, many people when we were all trying to do this before, like, when I was taking UCB classes or doing stand-up or whatever, a lot of people who are aspiring, as it sounds like you are, person in Chicago. But I can now, looking back, I'm like, what?
Michelle.
I'm like, oh, the similar traits that I see for all the people who did make it were all those people who just put it out there and then kept doing it and kept making it, because your first thing, I mean, I don't know, unless you're like a literal genius, isn't going to be that great. But the second thing is going to be 2% better. And the next thing is going to be 4% better. And it's going to get better and better and better the more you make it, the more you put it out there. And so I'd say just don't be precious. Do a ton of stuff, get it out there constantly. It's almost like the people who almost have their careers. They're almost like, I have a career. I'm making a career. I'm doing this pilot. I'm making this web series with this person. I'm making this feature at my friend's parents' lake house, whatever it is. Like the people who are already like, yeah, they're just making their careers, and they're just, then everyone in the industry is like, oh man, they're already doing it. Let's go and work with them. It's like, it's almost like, if you just say like, I'm a filmmaker, I'm making stuff, and here's 10 things I've made, here's 20 more things I want to make. It's just like, people get like, oh, okay. And they start to get on board with your vision. So it's just like, do it so much, do it because you love it. I'm sorry, I'm also being like, work so hard, because I don't want to be like part of the system that's like work. I'm like, relax, but also
have fun too.
It's tough.
Absolutely have fun also.
Have fun, but don't ever stop working.
And you know what actually is interesting and maybe on theme with this show? Find people that you love collaborating with and collaborate. I think like that's what filmmaking is. It's a village. It's a nomadic group of people that are making something together. And I think it can be true in writing. I think when I think about novelists, I'm like, oof, that's hard. You do that all alone. I'm like, I think look for people that you can work with and make you better and help each other.
It's more fun that way.
I think mine is similar to what you're saying. Is like, I think early on in my career, I fell into the trap, which is a very understandable trap and a very competitive thing, is seeing some people's success as my failure. And I think like, find your people that you love collaborating with, but also remember that everyone is on their own path in this industry. They really, really are. And sometimes it doesn't feel that way if you're competing for a job or something, but things follow your joy about what you're writing. And like Paul said, like find people you love collaborating with, keep doing it, keep working, but don't fall into the trap that looking at what everyone else is doing and that you need to be doing more. And because there's nothing good comes out of that. To compare is to despair, as they say. And so
that's good.
That's a good tattoo.
Yeah. So I really have had to learn that over and over in my career, and it's been really helpful.
It's fantastic. Don't let someone else's success, be your failure. To see it that way. Just keep working, doing the stuff you want to do, and don't afraid to be shit for a while, because everybody.
Yes. Yeah. I'm still doing that every day.
As everyone says, you got to keep doing it your whole career, I think.
Yeah. Never fucking ends.
But just keep doing it.
Never fucking ends, and it just gets harder. And on that optimistic note, everyone, this was so great. Thank you all for indulging me, for being so, just wonderful about talking about this show that justifiably is just burning up my social media feed. Everybody's talking about it, and I was late to get to it, by like a week, and then it's my everything. It's my everything. So thank you all for being here. Thank you to everyone who's watching us here in Zoom, on YouTube, whether you're watching it on Facebook. We appreciate all of the questions. So yeah, everybody have a great night. Thank you so much.